Welcome to the REMIC Leadership Module on Behavior. What is it? Why is it important? And how do we measure it? My name is Dr. Christy Bonfiglio, and I am the Director for both the Program for Inclusive Education as well as the Professional Standards and Graduate Studies here at ACE. Please take a moment and think about a behavior that you have witnessed in your school recently. Pause this PowerPoint and briefly describe it. Go ahead and write it down. What does your behavior look like? Is it general? Concise? Does your behavior have details? Could anyone identify this behavior based on your current description? You have recently been discussing behavior in schools on a broader context and within a framework of positive behavior intervention supports. At this time, I would like to take a closer look at behavior on an individual basis. Therefore, the goals for this module are to understand the foundation and theoretical underpinnings of behavior, to define behavior in measurable terms, identify the ABCs so that you can accurately understand the function of behavior and the purpose it serves. There is a strong historical foundation for the theories that surround behavior. As a brief outline, classical conditioning was studied by Pavlov, where he determined that there is a relationship between stimuli and respondent behavior in his famous study with a dog, food, and a bell. B.F. Skinner is known for his work with operant conditioning, or the relationship between overt events in the environment and changes in behavior. These events are the A's and the C's, or the antecedents and consequences, that we will investigate in the ABCs in just a bit. Social learning theory looked at the child's social environment and cognitive development. Bandura combined classical and operant conditioning principles in his classic study using the Bobo doll. And Lovaas is best known for his work in applied behavior analysis, directly applying the principles of behavior change in everyday settings, specifically during autism training. Let's take a quick moment to look at basic behavior concepts that will set the stage for your work in behavior. So what is behavior? It is an overt response that is both observable and measurable. Stimuli are events within a person's environment that form a relationship with the behavior. It can be the ding on your cell phone signaling a text message, or perhaps the smell of a fresh baked pie. The target behavior is the behavior that needs to be changed or replaced, the one that is of concern. In the beginning activity, it is most likely that the behavior you were thinking about in your school was this target behavior. An antecedent is the stimuli that occurs just prior to a behavior. It is the event that triggers the behavior. This is the A in the ABC. The C is the consequence. Please understand that a consequence is any event or change in the environment that follows a target behavior. In everyday vernacular, we think of a consequence as typically a punishment. It is something to get a behavior to stop. However, in the world of behavior analysis, a consequence can be a reinforcement or a punishment. It is simply what follows the target behavior that creates a change. Simply stated, behavior is what people do and say. It involves an action and is described with an action verb. Behavior may be overt or covert as people display public and private behaviors. For example, thinking or feeling. The latter of these are difficult to define and measure. However, educators and psychologists attempt to do so as accurately as possible. Behavior has one or more dimensions, a frequency, a duration, a latency, and it can be observed, described, and recorded. You can see it, you can define it, you can measure it. Behavior has an impact on the environment as it involves movement through space and it affects the space where it occurs. Moreover, behavior is lawful. Behavior occurs systematically. It is functional. So let's take a few moments and identify all the behaviors in these examples. Mia sits at her computer and types a letter to her parents. Preston rustles in his crib and cries loudly. His mother then picks him up and feeds him. Jaren's paper for his behavior modification class is a week late. Jerry gives the paper to his professor and lies, saying that it is late because he had to go home to see his sick grandmother. The professor accepts the paper without penalty. In the examples, you can see that Mia sits and types, Preston rustles and cries, and therefore Mom picks up the baby and feeds him. And there are multiple behaviors for both Jaron and his professor. It is critical that you think back to what a behavior is and look at these actions. A good target behavior can be anything. However, it needs to be operationally defined. So what is an operational definition? It is a way to define the target behavior. The description is observable and measurable, and it describes the behavior in action terms. If you close your eyes and describe the behavior, it paints an exact picture in your head. You can see the behavior. A good operational definition will allow multiple observers to record it with integrity. If you look at the following actions, the column on the left is much easier to operationalize. You can paint that picture of the behavior for the left column much easier than the right. For example, defining the behavior reads could simply be, Teresa follows along in her book with or without her fingers stating the words aloud. One could actually measure whether this is actually occurring. The column on the right, although these could be operationalized, it would be a bit more difficult. The following behaviors are ones often stated in a school environment: tantrum and on task. I would like you to take a few moments and operationalize these behaviors, one you wish to extinguish and one you would like as a replacement behavior, so that it could easily be measured with integrity. Please know that depending on the environment, the child, a teacher, etc., these definitions could be described quite differently. Let's look at tantrums. And on task. We have just spent some time talking about behavior. Behavior is often troublesome in a school environment, and one of the big challenges is to ensure everyone behaves so academic engagement and learning occur. When you have a student who cannot behave, you need to identify why he or she is doing so. Identifying the why, the purpose, or the function will allow you to address it appropriately. In order to do this, we need to look at the things that happen before and after a behavior in the entire ABC chain. A, or antecedent, is the thing, event, or stimulus that occurs just prior to the behavior. It sets the stage for the behavior, triggers it, or prompts it. There are multiple things that serve as antecedents, both at home and at school. So let's take a moment and think of a couple of examples for both. There are many, however, here are just a couple that come to mind that could trigger a behavior. John wakes up late, or Missy skips breakfast. In the school environment, Mr. Fisher asks Tim to complete his bell work, or the fire alarm sounds during the middle of a science experiment. Antecedents are important, given if we know what triggers a behavior, when it occurs, we can be ready for it and, moreover, look to make changes to the antecedent or teach a more appropriate response. The following documents can be used to record antecedents both within the home and the school environments. Please note that you have access to these forms in your resources. As discussed in detail, the B of the ABC is the behavior. It is the response that triggers. It is operationalized so that it can be observed and measured accurately. It follows the antecedent. And the C is the consequence. Again, it is simply the event that occurs after the behavior and affects the probability of the behavior occurring again in the future. If it is a form of reinforcement, the behavior is likely to increase. If it is a form of punishment, the behavior will decrease. Both of these are consequences. One increases the probability of reoccurrence and the other decreases. So let's think about a few consequences that occur after a behavior that either serve to increase or decrease that behavior. A couple of examples would include the following. With regards to reinforcement, it might be that A+ at the top of your homework. Or perhaps it is a good job using transition sentences between your paragraphs, Reggie. It's that praise. These would likely increase the likelihood that the behavior would occur again. If we were to look at punishment, it might be detention for arriving late to class. or maybe a flipping of the card for pushing during lineup. These would more likely decrease the likelihood that the behavior happens again. Therefore, when an antecedent happens, the student does the behavior followed by a consequence in order to get something or get out of something, the function. Here are a few additional resources that you could use to record the ABCs. Again, these documents are in your resources. So when we record and see patterns of ABCs, we can determine a function of the behavior. I provided a slide for you here, and at your convenience, please feel free to look at this short video and complete the following exercise. The target behavior is tantrum, so you'll need to operationalize it, identify the antecedents and the consequences. Hopefully this practice will allow you to think about the function, why something occurs. So the purpose of an ABC analysis is to determine the function. The function of the behavior is why it happens, the purpose of it. All behaviors happen for a reason, and typically we do behaviors for one of two reasons. Most simply stated, we either do a behavior to get something or to get out of something. What things do people get? Attention, a paycheck, affirmation for behaviors desired. And what do they get out of? Maybe perhaps homework, chores, jury duty. It is important to complete this analysis because once you identify a function, you can address the function and make changes to the environment, the behavior, or the responses to any of these. So now that we've talked a little bit about the components of behavior, antecedents, consequences, and identifying the function, I want to talk a little bit about a functional behavior assessment. An FBA is a thorough analysis of the ABCs to determine the function. You will complete this for the most difficult behaviors that disrupt the academic environment. It is quite time intensive, and therefore you will not have the resource for every issue you encounter, but you will not need it if you analyze behaviors in the process that we described above for the smaller behaviors. It includes interviews and observations, etc. This is a more formalized process, and these results are used to create a behavior intervention plan. Please note that it is required for a diagnosis of emotional behavior disorder. The FBA data are then used to create the behavior intervention plan. In the behavior plan, changes are made to the antecedents and the consequences as appropriate, which will then affect a behavior change. A replacement behavior is identified for the target behavior, and just as you were expected to do with the FBA, you need to continue a data collection to see if your plan is working. Members of the team in your school should be involved in the FBA BIP process to ensure its success. Behavior is sophisticated, yet it can be broken down and analyzed sequentially. When educators discover the function of behavior and make changes to the environment or the reactions to behavior, behavior change can occur. This is a brief introduction to the field of behavior. However, it provides a foundation for you as you react to the situations in your schools with a more careful eye.